Welcome to the Property Podcast, the home of news and debate about building long-term wealth from property investment for beginners and experts alike. And now for your hosts. They may not be as cool as me, but they do know their property. It's Rob and Rob.
Wow, episode 200, and what a blast from the past. I can't believe he came back for the big one, Rob.
Good old Rick. The number of listeners that man lost us. So many people in the early days. Why would I want to hear an American talk about property? Well, if you listened beyond the first 30 seconds, you'd have a couple of Brits talking rubbish about property instead. But yeah, we thought we would drop that in for the purists. We wanted to go back and put in more clips from episode 1, but we couldn't bear to listen to any of it. So we stopped at about 20 seconds. But we needed a bit of self-indulgence because this is episode 200 of the Property Podcast. We've been going for nearly 4 years now. And in this episode, we're going to share some of the lessons that we've learned along the way, both related to property and not related to property, but very much applicable to that and many other things in life. So we're going to be doing that, but just because we're being self-indulgent doesn't mean that we don't have a news story and a great resource for you, because we do, of course. Before we get into all that, though, it's just been meetup time, the first meetup of the year. I didn't make it along to one because I was on my way back from Malta on my Christmas holidays. But Rob, you did. Where did you get to?
I went to Milton Keynes, and of course I got lost in the roundabout system on the way because the road was closed. But when I did get there, and I wasn't too late, I got to a great meetup. The Milton Keynes meetup is really, really good. It's really well located. So if you're travelling distance, you're not too far off the M1, Northampton, Bedford, anywhere else, get along. It's a really, really nice meetup and a really nice venue. It's the type of place I'd go to when a meetup isn't on. It's a lovely, lovely pub. Jason, who runs it, is a great guy. I've got high hopes for that meetup. I think it's going to do really, really well. I think it's going to be one of the stronger ones we'll have moving forward. So if you are in the area, you're not too far away, come on, it's January still. This is the time of year where you should be motivated, should be pushing yourself to do more this year, especially if you're interested in property. Get along. They're very, very nice and accommodating there, very friendly. You'll have a great time, and I'm sure learn a lot too. So make sure that happens.
Absolutely. I'll be adding that one to my list. And speaking about doing more this year, the Property Geek podcast is back. So I'm going to be doing more in the way of podcasting. It's something that I've been asked about endlessly through last year when it's coming back. People really like the interviews. People really like the depth that we get into on certain issues. It's a bit of a counterpoint to the Property Podcast. It brings other people in, and it's back. The first episode went out last week. I forgot to mention it last week in the excitement of all the predictions. So do make sure that you subscribe. I'm taking a series-based approach this year. So there's going to be a whole run of episodes specifically about all the changes that are happening right now in terms of mortgages, tax, prices, all manner of things. I'm going to be bringing in experts. I'm going to be bringing in individual investors just like you to share their experiences of this and packaging all that all up. So well worth a listen. If you just go over to propertygeek.net and click on podcast in the menu, that will show you all the episodes. And importantly, it will also show you how to subscribe. And if you're not subscribing to podcasts, make sure you do it. Subscribe to the Property Geek podcast, subscribe to the Property Podcast. Then that way you'll get Ask Rob and Rob as well. And that means you get 3 doses then of property goodness every week. It comes to you. You don't have to make any effort at all. All you need to do is listen, enjoy, and learn.
Make sure you do. Another thing that you need to add to your January motivation list. So new story time now. And guess what, Rob? The government's going to build, and you can't see my face now, the government's going to build more homes and more houses. Now, I don't know about you, Rob, but over the last 200 episodes, have we heard this before?
Yeah, I mean, I never actually follow up on these stories, so I just hear the announcements that they're building 200,000 here, 300,000 there. There's all these things going on. Presumably they actually go and build all these, so it's unbelievable there's actually any countryside left, because you'd think there'd just be hundreds of billions of houses by now.
Yeah. Weirdly, it seems that politicians haven't been true to their word. I know. There's probably a lot of people now listening to the podcast on a run or on the train or wherever you are thinking, wow, that sounds incredible. Politicians not delivering on what they say. But actually, believe it or not, it is true. In the past, we've had multiple chancellors, governments, housing ministers announce that we will be building new homes. George Osborne's garden villages and cities. They don't seem to be doing too well at the moment because they don't exist. That was a big announcement a year or two back. But don't worry, we've got another one for you. And this time the government is planning to build multiple garden towns and villages to ease the housing shortage. That's the headline. 200,000 homes to ease the housing shortage. And they've named 14 garden villages and 3 garden towns, which will help with this. Rob, if they build all of these, then I will eat my microphone. It's just not going to happen. We've seen this time and time and again, and they're just never delivered on. They may build some, and some are better than none, but I just can't see them all happening. I like the intention. The intention is good, but the delivery, as always, seems to be very, very poor. The other bugbear, which I'm sure you knew was coming next, there's these 200,000 homes, which will be built over several years. It's not even a drop in the ocean of what's needed in terms of supply and demand.
So are we saying this is basically a re-announcement of the previous announcement that didn't happen, and we think this one probably isn't going to happen either? Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, a fair summary. And considering we need minimum 250,000 homes every year, 200,000 over several years isn't going to make the slightest bit of difference. And that's even if they built them all, which they probably won't. But don't worry, that's about as negative as we're going to get on this podcast because we have a lot to celebrate.
Yeah, we do. We're celebrating 200 episodes. It's only a number, but it's a nice number. We've met lots of people over the course of doing the podcast at meetups, at summits, out and about, at the open day we did recently. And whenever we do, we're always really flattered by the people who come up to us and say that the podcast has really helped them. They've learnt a lot, and importantly, they've put that learning into action. People have gone on to buy their first properties. People who had bought a long time ago but kind of gone cold on the idea have got enthusiastic again. And that's brilliant to hear. It's not something that we take too much credit for because we are just basically talking and you have to go and do the hard bit of actually making it happen. So we don't take credit, but we definitely enjoy hearing it. But those people are not the only ones to benefit. We have learned an absolute ton from doing the podcast for the last nearly 4 years. And a lot of those lessons, we were talking about them, and a lot of them are kind of useful general principles that you can apply to other things. So we've learned a lot about podcasting. We've got a lot better at podcasting. If you do go back and listen to episode 1 in full, do not do that, please. But if you do, you'd know we've clearly learned a lot about podcasting, but we've learned lots more kind of general lessons about life, business, achievement, and all that kind of thing. And we thought it'd be useful for episode 200 to run through some of those lessons.
Okay, so let's start with the first one. And the first one, I think, is an important one because everyone can take this on board. And it's something I try to pass on to our team members as well, is you learn from teaching. So by helping people over the last 200 episodes and talking about a variety of subjects, it's actually, made us even more of experts in our subject. When we started, I'd like to think we knew what we were talking about. We wouldn't have started a podcast without it. But we are way further on now than we were when we started. And a big, big part of that is because we've been teaching so much. So there were certain things we were very strong at from the start. But there were other aspects that we knew little or nothing about. And we've had to force ourselves to learn so we can pass the education lessons on to yourself. And by doing that, it's enhanced our learning several times over. It's proven that by teaching is one of the most effective ways to teach yourself or to learn yourself. More effective than reading a book, for example, or watching a TV program. I can't believe it's more effective than listening to a podcast. But it is one of the best ways you can learn. Now, that's going to be weird if you start preaching to people around the dinner table about property if they have no interest. But there are things you can do. You can go onto the Property Hub, for example. You can write about what you've learned. That's a way of teaching. You can go to meetups and guide people who are new to property. That's a way of teaching. There are easy ways of doing this. It may sound who am I going to teach? You don't have to start a podcast to do this. There's so many easy, accessible ways to teach. But we've found it an amazing, unexpected benefit that by doing these 200 episodes, it has skyrocketed our own personal learning as well.
Yeah, it really has. You think you understand something, but then you actually go to explain it to someone else and you realise quite quickly when you don't. When you come to teach something, you make sure that you know it. And also from interacting with people, you kind of come to examine your own views more closely. I think we've changed our mind on certain things as well, that we'd kind of take them as being fact, but then in the course of talking about it a lot, explaining it to people, we've realised, oh, actually, maybe it's not quite like that at all. So you do learn an enormous amount. I've found the same things with writing my books. I sort of start writing almost for myself to help me understand something, and that helps to explain it to other people. Making something simple is really, really hard. And so the more practice you can get at doing that, the better off you'll be. And like you say, Rob, that doesn't have to be in a big way. It can be in a small way. And that way everyone benefits. You get to increase your understanding and you get to help other people out too.
Let's talk about those people, Rob. Now, I'm not saying I didn't know this 200 episodes ago, but I think it's enhanced it. I used to meet a lot of property investors before the property podcast. I've been in property a long time, but we've certainly met a whole lot more since. And one thing that is really apparent is the vast majority of property investors are normal people. Yes, normal people. Yes, the mainstream media would have you think differently, that these are fat ogres who just guzzle money and hate people and are really mean. But actually, a lot of them are normal people, and many of them are kind and generous. Who knew?
Yeah, if you go into a newspaper comments section on their website on something about anything to do with property, which I don't do anymore because it's just horrendous. But if you do, people just seem to have this crazy idea, like this caricature of what landlords are like. And I'm sure a few of them are. But yeah, the most astonishing thing for me from doing this, and I'd met some investors before, but I've met hundreds now, and they are normal people. They are people who are just trying to do the best for themselves. They take pride in doing a good job and providing a good service, and they're just extremely kind and generous people. I've not had anyone cackling about how much they're screwing their tenants for rent. I've not heard any of that at all. People are just doing the best, working hard. They tend to be quite interesting people as well, because you have to be quite motivated to actually go out and do something a bit different. You have to actually get the money together in the first place, which means you probably work quite hard. Property investors, I think, are great people. And what the greatest pleasure for me for doing this has been the number of great people I've got to meet.
And very much linked to that is another lesson is most people are willing to help, and guide and give knowledge and advice if they've done a bit already. Or even if they haven't, just the things they've learned from reading and listening. That is a common theme through the people that we've met over the last 200 episodes, is the willingness to help. That could be at the meetups, super, super friendly bunch of people, or the Property Hub itself, the forum. The amount of people who are giving knowledge day after day and helping people out is absolutely fantastic. People willing to give their time and knowledge with no agenda is absolutely brilliant. And it really reinforces the point that the majority, not all, but the majority of these expensive property courses are an absolute waste of time, because the vast majority of that knowledge is out there free. Yes, if it's something tailored to you or a very niche subject, then you may want to do a course. I get it. But actually, if you just want general property knowledge or want to know a little bit more about HMOs or rent to rent or something else like that, going on a course actually for most of those people is a waste of money. You can get it all for free. If you want to pay, fine, but just know that the information is free within this community. People will help. If you ask questions, you will get the answers.
Yeah, and it's a bit more effort, of course, because if someone's promoting a course, they're going to be making the effort to put it in front of you, and it just kind of drops into your life somehow. If you are going to seek that expertise from someone else, they might be willing to help, but you have to go and find them. So it's not just that, okay, I'll get this information without having to pay the £1,000 or whatever it is for the course. You'll get knowledge which is grounded far more in everyday experience, because not all, but a lot of people who are doing courses are doing more courses than actually doing. So if you're speaking to somebody who's not getting any monetary reward for it, they're just kind of doing it around what they're doing anyway, then chances are you'll get it more detailed knowledge. They'll share more. They'll be holding nothing back. They won't be always trying to entice you in for the next thing. And you'll end up with a far more rewarding relationship, and you'll have someone who you can keep going back to for advice. So all the tools are there. You have to work a little bit harder, but through the meetups and the forum and things outside the Property Hub as well, amazingly, all the tools are there. And if you're willing to make the effort, you'll find it not just a money saver, but far more rewarding too.
Absolutely agree. I actually think those type of people who go out and work for the knowledge are far more likely to be successful as well. So, very good point. And the unexpected benefit of doing the 200 episodes and everything else we do in terms of knowledge given away, webinars, courses, the forum, all this stuff we give away and people very kindly thank us for on a regular basis. People sometimes say to us, "Oh, what do you get in return?" But actually, we get a lot. Now, Rob, you might have to stop me here because I might get a bit hippie-ish, but I've found that the more we give, the better we seem to do in our own endeavours related to property or business or whatever else we do. And there's this concept that givers get. And the more you give, the more good stuff comes back to you. I know, don't worry, we're not going to go on about this too long for those people who are tutting now, who are finding this a bit weird. But as a concept, I've found it to be true. And you can mock me if you want, but it seems to work. Now, it doesn't mean we give to get, absolutely not. But it just seems to be an unexpected upside benefit. All I can say is the more podcasts we do and the longer we've done this, the better our business and property lives have become. Now, you could say, well, that's because you put more work in, you've been doing it longer, so the upside is there. So I get all that as well. But it seems to be a nice correlation between the two.
Yeah, let's all hold hands and put flowers in our hair. No, it is completely true though. I totally agree. I think related to that as well, some people who are kind of stuck in the old way of doing things feel like giving is a risk. Like if they give knowledge away, then somebody will not want to do business, who would have done business with them won't do business with them because, or they'll have created a competitor. So if they're giving property knowledge away to someone who's wanting to get started, there's suddenly more competition in the market. But the complete opposite seems to be true in the experience that we've had. We'll just give everything away. And despite freely giving away everything we know, just more and more seems to come back. It is counterintuitive, but once you've started doing it, you very quickly see the results. So I think that ties in a few of the previous points we made quite nicely.
But it doesn't end there. There have been other unexpected benefits and lessons we've learned too.
Yeah, what I think is a huge one is accountability. And it's something that I always knew was important. Like, I've always done better when I've worked with other people on things than when I've done it on my own. But this podcast has really taught me the importance of accountability, because we've done this podcast. We've recorded one every week without fail for nearly 4 years. And you only have to look at the record of our individual podcasts, Property News Radio and Property Geek, to know that that doesn't just happen. When we try to do them on our own, we're only accountable to ourselves. Things slip because it's hard. Doing something every week is really difficult. And the only reason that we have made it to 200 in a row unbroken is because we're accountable to each other. So I've recorded episodes at 2 a.m. when I've been away. We've recorded episodes ill. We've recorded episodes in really difficult places where we could barely hear each other. We've recorded episodes when we're extremely busy. We've recorded episodes when we're ill. We've recorded episodes in situations where if it had just been us on our own, we'd probably go, you know what? I'll just skip it. And once you start skipping one, it becomes really easy to skip the next one. And before you know it, you're not doing it anymore. Because we're accountable to each other, we've done it every single time. And I think that that is a massively important lesson for anything in life, really, because your own willpower and your own determination, however great it is still limited, and you're still fallible and human. But if you've got somebody else holding you accountable, you're far more likely to succeed. That's what's so powerful about the summits that we do, because we come along, we give you a plan, you're accountable to us, but we also give you the structure to stay in touch with everybody else who is there at the summit. And the people who've gone on to do best, we follow up, and the people who've done the best a year or 2 years later are the ones who've kept in regular contact with the people that they've met. And I think you can apply this principle to pretty much anything. You can definitely apply it to property, because it's the kind of thing where there are setbacks all the time. And it is really challenging, and it is very tempting to give up sometimes. But pretty much anything that you want to achieve, I think if you apply accountability to it, you will be like not even 10 times, 100 times more likely to get to where you want to be as a result.
I absolutely agree. It's hard to pick out a best lesson or the most valuable thing, but this is right up there. The accountability thing is huge. Rob's really emphasised the point of how much a difference it's made to the podcast. But as he said, this applies universally across your life, your business. Everything you do can be enhanced, improved through accountability. Now, That doesn't necessarily mean you need a property partner, but just somebody, a group member, somebody in a similar situation, could be a family member, whoever it needs to be, but someone who will truly hold you accountable so you can deliver on the things you want to do. Because as Rob said, life gets in the way. It's easy to get in the way. There's always a reason not to do something, and when you're left up to your own thoughts, you'll probably find that reason. It's hard to be strong-willed all the time. So accountability, huge, huge lesson.
Yeah, and another thing that I've taken away from the podcast is the importance of starting before you feel ready. So in my experience of doing various things, including writing, including the podcast, whenever you do, however ready you feel, when you look back, you're always going to be embarrassed by your earliest work. And we alluded to this with the podcast earlier, but I'll regularly bump into people who say that they discovered the podcast sort of recently, and they went all the way back and started at episode 1 to catch up on the whole thing. I was like, oh no, don't go and listen to episode 1. It's awful. But I think even if we'd had, I don't know, some kind of lessons in podcasting, if such a thing existed, we'd still be embarrassed when we went back to listen to episode 1. That's always going to be the case. But you have to start. And if you wait till you feel ready, you're never going to start. So you just have to start before you feel ready. It's the only way. And with property, I think that's a challenging thing to do because it is something where there's a lot at stake. There's a lot of money. It's not something where you can just kind of go, oh, well, if it all goes wrong, I'll lose all my money. I'll just write the whole thing off and it'll be okay. It is difficult to just start before you feel ready. The kind of inclination is to learn as much as you possibly can and wait until you know every last facet of it and you can predict precisely what's going to happen. But if you wait for that point, you will never get started. So the only way to do it is just go for it. That doesn't mean rush blindly in like an idiot. I don't think if you're listening to this podcast, you have to worry about that. You're clearly not that kind of person. You're educating yourself in some kind of way. So it's more likely that you'll wait for perfection and that perfection will never come.
Completely agree. We've talked about it before, but the biggest regret in property is not starting sooner. You just need that little bit more knowledge or that extra visit to a course or whatever it may be. The time is now. In fact, it was yesterday, but yesterday's gone, so the next best time is now. So do it. Start. It might not be property. It might be other things you're considering. Just commit. Do it. You know what? If it doesn't work out, yes, property is a more expensive lesson, but actually the worst things that go in property, most of them are not as bad as you think. We've talked about what goes wrong in property multiple times, but at no point have we ever said, and the time we lost that property and it all collapsed and we lost all our money. It's been never. And for the hundreds and thousands of property investors that we've worked with since we started the podcast, not one's told me that they've, been repossessed or anything like that. So if the worst case is highly, highly, highly unlikely to happen, the rest is stuff you can deal with. So just commit, get going, do something, take action. Taking action is by far one of the best things you can do. And trust us, we say this time and time again, but the real learning starts when you actually invest. So if you haven't invested yet, or you've been on a bit of a pause, do it. Commit. You'll feel better afterwards.
Yeah, definitely. And the final lesson from me, linked to that as well, is if you're enthusiastic about something, even if you don't know where it's going to lead, do it anyway. Because with this podcast, we didn't know where this was going to go. And it might look, in retrospect, if you're kind of joining the dots backwards, like it was all some kind of master plan. It's like, start podcast, launch community, have letting agency off the back of it. And we had all these different things in our mind mapped out. No, we just thought it would be fun to start a podcast. And I think that's often the way things are. It's very hard to know where things are going to lead. If you've got a firm idea of where something is going to go wrong, you'll probably be wrong or disappointed. It's best to just kind of do what you're enthusiastic about and trust that useful things will happen of it. So kind of all of my lessons are around action, I suppose, because if you do something, the worst that can happen is you'll be no further forward. But it's almost certain, I would say, that if you do something, that it will go somewhere interesting. You don't necessarily know where it's going to go, but it's probably going to be somewhere better. So all you've got to do is something. And if you kind of take that view and you go, well, it was fine, then I don't have to wait until I know everything. And I don't have to wait until I've got this master plan and I can see exactly how these things are going to go. But that takes the pressure off, doesn't it? All you've got to do is do something and see what happens. Easy.
So hopefully you've got loads of value from that. It's not our typical podcast episode, but actually when we do something a bit different, we get loads of great feedback. So hopefully you enjoyed that. And I can promise you they're just as valuable, the lessons we've given you there. But because it's a special episode, we decided to go back to the archives and pick out a few of our favourite episodes that you can listen to and enjoy, because we get great feedback on these particular episodes. So we'll link to them in the show notes. This week, it's very easy to get to them. It's thepropertyhub.net/200. Couldn't be easier. Thepropertyhub.net/200, and you will find the links to these episodes, and the vast majority are property related. So let's start with a property related one, Rob, and pretty much we've made our names on this particular subject. It's not our own concept, but we really took it to heart and developed it and explained it, and people always want to talk to us about it. It's the 18-year property cycle.
Yeah, episode 69, the 18-year property cycle. I remember recording that one. I was in, where was I? I think I was in Prague at the time. I remember recording it, and sometimes, normally these get edited a little bit, but I think this one we just seemed to go on for ages, getting more and more excited about it. And I think Chris must have done an amazing editing job with this one because it ended up sounding quite coherent, but it was just really excitable because I think as we were talking, again, like when you teach something, you come to really understand it. I think as we were talking about it, we realized what a fundamental concept it was and how powerful it could be. Yeah, we completely nicked it and with the concept, and we're using it for a completely different purpose than from what it was originally intended. But nevertheless, I think it is really important. It was a lot of fun to record, and from the feedback we get, I know a lot of people have found that concept as exciting and as powerful as we did.
So that's a must listen to. Another one that people talk to us about, and a little bit more recent, is the live Property Investor Show. That was a lot of fun for us. That's an episode that was unedited. It was us live in front of a live audience. I can't remember how many people, Rob, 150, 200 people, all looking at us, ready for us to perform without an editor standing next to us. So that was an intense pressure situation, but in the best possible way. And we really enjoyed that episode. That's episode 163. It was fun.
It was a lot of fun, and that's a great illustration, I think, of how you develop over time. And if you just start something, you never know where it's going to go. You improve over time. I never would have thought that we'd be able to do that at the start. Never. But we did, and it was, not only did it go pretty well, but it was loads of fun. I actually enjoyed doing it in front of a couple of hundred people. So yeah, a good illustration of that, and an entertaining listen as well. Another surprisingly entertaining listen was all the way back in episode 24, an episode on inflation. Inflation, your worst enemy or your best friend was the name of the episode. I think we were sort of getting into our stride by this point, but nevertheless, an episode about inflation, that seemed like it was going to be really hard going. It's something that nobody really pays any attention to, and it's something you wouldn't think would be very exciting. But the reason that this episode is a highlight, I think, is because we did a pretty decent job of explaining what inflation is, why it matters, and why it is something that you should be thinking about, and how, based on what you do, it can either work against you in a big way or for you in a big way. Yeah,
not a sexy subject, but we get great feedback on that one. An episode that wasn't property related, this was actually part of a few business episodes we did around episode 50, where we celebrated the milestone of 50. Feels a long time ago now. And we did some interviews with some business leaders that we knew of, and we invited onto the podcast, and they very kindly came on. And episode 52, we interviewed Noah Kagan. Now, Noah Kagan is known in business circles, internet marketer, but not in a cheesy bad way. Some of those have bad reputations. Noah knows a lot about business, but what made it really fun was Noah himself. He was just as entertaining, maybe even more so, off the mic as he was on it. Bonkers in a great way. /Noah, thepropertyhub.net /Noah, if you want to listen to that one. But that was entertaining, Rob. He turned up a bit late. I think we were recording it very, very late in the evening to match his times in America. And it was all a bit all over the place, but ended up a really good episode.
It was nuts. I think that one, I'm pretty sure the recording of that went on for hours. I'm pretty sure we turned up about 2 hours late. I think I was meant to be recording it at 2 a.m. It ended up being 4 a.m. by the time it happened, because I was in Thailand. You were in London, so it was getting super late there as well. And then he came on and just, it was bonkers. You really do need to listen to it, because there's loads and loads in there. And I think really what might be one of the things you have to listen to a couple of times too, is at first you're just like, what is this guy talking about? But then when you get into it, you're like, actually, he's not just crazy, he's a crazy genius. So we're very grateful to him and all the other people who came on to share their expertise with us. That was a lot of fun.
But before we get to what's coming up next week and our resource of the week, which is a really good one, we must give some thank yous. And before we do our normal review thank yous, we have to give thank yous to certain people. We absolutely have to thank Chris. Chris, our editor, if you hear us mention time to time, he has done a great job. He's been with us from the very, very beginning, and he's made us sound half decent. Trust me, today's episode, my internet's broken about 3 or 4 times. Doesn't always happen, but it has today. But you won't feel that, because Chris will do a great job, or hopefully. So, Chris, thank you for all the work you've put into the podcast. It wouldn't be the same without you. And of course, our amazing team, Rob, from the Property Hub, the people who make things happen in the background, but specifically Vicky, who's helping us more recently with the podcast, taking a lot of the work off us and made life easier.
Yeah, the team that has developed as we've done this has been absolutely fantastic. It's allowed us to do more and more. They have been brilliant. Chris definitely, though, needs to get thanked the most, because he's got the outtakes. He's got the power to ruin us. But yeah, everyone who has worked with us has allowed us to take the credit while they do all the work in the background, which is always good. And we also, of course, need to give a massive thank you to everybody who has listened, especially everybody who's come along to a meetup or one of the events that we've done, anyone we've interacted with in any way. But even if all you do is listen every Thursday, that's all we need. Keep doing that, because it makes us very happy, and it means that we will keep doing it and we'll keep reaping all the benefits from it that we've talked about today. So it's all very selfish, really.
It is, but it doesn't get lost on us that this podcast has been downloaded millions, not million, millions of times. And each and every month, currently, it gets over 100,000 downloads, which is kind of just mind-blowing to think that there's that many people, because it's just Rob and I turning on a microphone every week, having a laugh. So the fact that so many people enjoy it, resonate with it, and commit and get involved in all the other things we do as well is absolutely fantastic. So thank you so much. We'd do it if we had 100 people listening, but the fact is, it just makes it even more worthwhile that we know that we've got so many people that we have to please and entertain every single week. So thank you to you. And I think we should extend that, Rob. I think we should do something a little bit different this week.
Okay, what have you got in mind?
Okay, well, we've got quite a lot of reviews coming, and we're a little bit behind, so I think we should do a little bit catch up, some of the shorter reviews. But maybe we should have some entertaining light music in the background while we read reviews very quickly. How's that sound?
Sounds good to me. Cue the music.
Rob and Rob deliver top content every week. The approach is always pragmatic and practical. The information is invaluable. Thank you so much for everything I've learned. Keep on going. That's Mond Ist.
Jacob16161 says, absolutely banging. Rob and Rob share heaps of info that's valuable to newbies like me or experienced investors. I've been making their way through their episodes and enjoyed learning from these guys. Also, get on their website and take their free courses. Thanks, Rob and Rob, for sharing your research and knowledge.
Susie Shep, 5 stars. Thank you guys for your podcast. So many good bits of knowledge that would take years to find on my own. Some good things are starting to come out of what I'm learning.
Rory VDB. Oh, I know Rory. Thank you for that. 5 stars. He says, I listen to the podcast religiously. I work in property here in China for a property investment company that has a strong UK focus. I recommend the podcast to all my clients along with all Rob Dix's books. Thanks, Rob and Rob, for delivering such an easily digestible and informative podcast. Keep up the great work.
Naz813, Rob and Rob, thank you so much for providing valuable information on property. I've listened to every single episode in the space of 3 months. Thank you.
Phil from Bath gives us 5 stars and says, a thoroughly enjoyable podcast to listen to. Very well presented and researched. Thank you both so much for imparting your knowledge about property. A genuine benefit for the listeners.
And Brett Seisland says, thanks for the great podcast and content, guys. Found it about a year ago. and now I've already invested in one property. I'm using my newfound knowledge from the podcast and other resources to plan my next investment. It's not a stretch to say that it's changed my mindset and planning for the future. I'm now addicted to property, and it's mostly down to you. Cheers. Well, cheers to all of you wonderful people who support the podcast. One of the reasons, certainly, that it does so well on the charts is so many people leave reviews. So thank you. That is awesome.
Whew. Okay. How can we repay you? Well, maybe with a resource of the week. Although, in fact, we need to give thanks to this for this one as well. This one is from Bjorn. Bjorn is a machine. I think he's probably given us more news story and resource tip-offs than anyone else. So thank you to him. And this one, Rob, I don't know if you've had a chance to explore it yet, but it's called the Top Inbox. I've
installed it, and it looks very promising. So we've mentioned certain tools that work with Gmail in the past, like Boomerang, Mailbox. I think there's multiple we've mentioned. Yesware, I think's another one. There's different things you can do with all these applications. You can see when people have read your emails. You can say, I want to send this email at a more appropriate time. So maybe you're working very, very late in the evening and you don't want this email to land on their inbox until the morning. You can set that to happen. There's loads and loads of things you can do. Really, really interesting app. But the best thing is, some of the apps we've mentioned in the past have got a free bit, and then once you've used so much, there's a charge. The Top Inbox is completely free. Now, I don't know if it'll always stay that way, because I can't see where it's going, because there is no premium service to it. So why they keep building and developing it, we'll have to see. But for now, it's free, and it looks really interesting. Haven't used it, but I've installed it, and if you use Chrome, Google Chrome, and you use Gmail, super simple, as you know, a couple of clicks and it's done. So check it out. We'll link to it in the show notes, thepropertyhub.net/200.
Okay, so that's a wrap for episode 200. Next week, back to pure property business as usual. This should be a good one. We're going to be talking about where to invest in 2017. So we get asked questions a lot. One of the most popular questions is, where are we in the 18-year property cycle? One of the other most popular questions is, where should I be investing? Where's the best place right now? Well, we're going to answer.
I'm looking forward to that. I did quite a bit of that at the meetup last night. Another thing you should be doing, besides joining us next Tuesday for Ask Rob and Rob and the podcast next Thursday, is subscribing to the magazine. You've got a few days before the cut-off for the next issue. It is a cracker, I promise you. So get your subscription in. It's only $5 per issue, and that includes delivery. An absolute bargain. It's a beautiful, beautiful magazine. Really high quality. And the writers we've got are excellent. So check that out if you haven't already. Thousands of you already subscribe, but for those who don't, get on board. You won't regret it. And if you don't like it, it's $5. Cancel. But for $5, I think it's worth finding out.
Okay, so go do that now if you haven't already. Other than that, though, thank you for indulging us. Thank you for listening to this special episode. We'll be back on Tuesday with Ask Rob and Rob, and back here to talk about where to invest in 2017 next Thursday. Look forward to seeing you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.